This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and we are fully cracking to the third chapter of the NBA 2022-2023 NBA season. This is playoff time, man, and such an exciting time. The buzz, the atmosphere, the pageantry, the galore, the glitz, the glamour, all of that is in full display. All the hard work for 16 teams to give themselves an opportunity to participate and play for a championship. It all comes down to these next coming weeks, and it's just an exciting time to be. And while people are focusing on that, we still focusing on bodying up them teams that just fell a little bit short, didn't quite make it, and will be at some point on our slab as we continue to narrow down that field, man. It's just an exciting time altogether. As always, let me go and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man's www.SHARPZ.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my brother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, Mr. Shaw? Big old smile on your face. I know this is the best time of the year.
It is the best time of the year, my guy, and the worst time for my lovely wife. She hates this games upon games upon games every day, but she knows what it is. She's very supportive. Yeah, it's a wild situation, but I got to say, man, you know, the NBA continues to deliver really and truly exciting play-in tournament. Well, obviously, we're in the actual playoffs now. Great stuff here, and we have, as a result of the play-in tournament, a couple teams jumping the line in the autopsy report as they are fresh. So we're going to go ahead and get to them first,
right? Yeah, I mean, listen, for those fans, for the teams that we are going to be discussing for this week's autopsy report, I know the wound's still fresh, like the blackout is still real. I understand, but it has to be done. So fret not. You know, it actually, as what they say in Gladiator, they died a good death, right? So we will make sure that we properly honor the teams that we will be discussing in this week's edition of the Autopsy Report. You know, I'm not going to give any surprises to it. We're going to be talking about the Chicago Bulls and the Oklahoma City Thunder. And listen, when I say good death, I say that to say teams better pay attention to what the Bulls and the Oklahoma City Thunder did this past season, and ultimately what they almost did in upending our interpretations of what the 16-team layout was going to be for this year's playoffs. So we're going to have some really good things to say, and that's always a good thing when we're talking about teams that get eliminated. So, you know, Shaw, like you said, it can't be bad when some of these teams jump the line. It's not because we just need to, like, you know what I'm saying, autopsy them quick. It's we want to autopsy them in a good way because they're going to be rising out of the dead real quick. They're going to be on their Undertaker-ish real quick. They can't wait for the offseason to begin, technically for them now, but they can't wait for them OTAs and the season to quickly turn itself around after draft and everything like that, because some of these dudes, after the way that they came out and performed, chomping at the bit for them to get back out there again.
Yes, sir, man. Exciting. So I love talking about these teams, and Chicago, we've had a lot of conversation about on our show over the course of the year. So we had to kind of jump the line, as you alluded to, get them in here as well, because they were almost there. They were almost a contender, as they say.
They were right there, right?
Yeah.
Right there. They were just so close. All right. So we'll be talking about those two teams in this week's edition. Before we do that, Shaw, and, you know, we got obviously get into our plugs, I just wanted to get your interpretations of, you know, what the play-in altogether really, you know, represented for you. What were your initial thoughts about the buzz? Has the NBA really been able to take advantage of the momentum of the implementation of the play-in tournament? And exactly from, you know, what you gathered, the competition that took place, this, you know, the way things kind of played itself out. Any regrets, you know, anything left to be desired, anything left on the table when we talk about the NBA's attempt at elevating the viewership during this time of the year?
Nah, they've hit it out the park. Pugnants, detractors, anybody who had anything negative to say about it, I think is on board now. We already know what it did to the end of the season in terms of keeping teams competitive, and more or less, you know, fighting to the very end for whatever seeding and spot they could potentially get into. Then the games themselves actually delivered. The only subpar game I'd say was probably Atlanta and Miami, and then Miami being the 7th seed coming into it, losing it, and now ultimately capturing the 8th seed. That creates intrigue, I think, for the play-in tournament as we continue to push it forward. But even all the games, with the exception of that one, were competitive throughout. You know, Miami made a little push, came back. Atlanta kind of shut them down, but everything else was really, really good basketball. Unfortunately for OKC, though, that last game against Minnesota wasn't all that amazing, but them being there with a chance to get into the play-in, I think, was the excitement we were all looking for as a young team that probably wasn't supposed to be this far anyway.
Yeah, and look, I know we're going to have an opportunity to eventually have an autopsy report on the Atlanta Hawks. I think, and I'm not saying that to say, oh, you know, this team is not capable of making some kind of a run. But I think what it highlighted to me, Shaw, when I saw that game against, you know, the Hawks versus the Miami Heat, and then to see what they basically did, you know, first round match against the Boston Celtics. This is a team that has to ride on momentum and or the matchups that they're going to be set up against, right? Because if you told me that the way that the Miami Heat, this team always plays up when it absolutely needs to, and the Atlanta Hawks, it's just so inconsistent. And this is just a one-off thing. This has kind of been the trend for them now for the last couple of years since that Cinderella run, right? So like, it's just really interesting to me, Shaw, how when we talked about how matchups, you know what I'm saying, is going to be quintessential. I think you can really make that argument with how the East has been set up and where teams have lined themselves up specifically. The really good teams, you're saying they should take care of business, but you will see moments where just because, you know, they're supposed to be the better team from a matchup perspective, if the coaches know what they're doing, they can really make a series of this. So it'll be interesting to see who handles their business early. Don't let these teams that, you know, obviously they got in, it was nice they got in, don't let them hang around, because then they'll start really making things very interesting, you know what I'm saying, and pushing this to what would be maybe a 5-6 game series at best to a possible 7.
Yeah. The only thing I'd say is obviously Atlanta, Miami switched places from what I would have thought. Minnesota still got in. They probably, even without Gobert, should have captured the 7 seed, but lost that game in overtime against the Lakers, and you know, really, pretty much what was a thriller. And they're still in. So the teams that I thought were going to get in still did. The order, not quite exactly what I thought, you know, actually as the season concluded. But again, it was great basketball to watch, and a lot I think of interest throughout the NBA atmosphere with those games that were played.
Absolutely, man. All right, so as always, man, we appreciate everybody who continues to follow along, from our veteran listeners to our new listeners. We appreciate you guys showing the love and support, being able to use us as your listening platform to get what you need, geared up, geeked up, you know, for the remainder of this NBA season and moving beyond. And as always, we appreciate you for that. As always, get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at Game Face Lead. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. Just look for the Baseline and add us on. And you can listen to this episode and any of our previous episodes as well too. Also know that we're on TV, right? We're on the streamings apps as well, right? Catch us on YouTube. Always find us through the 19 Media Group. That's our family. Those are our peoples. The 19 Media Group be running these content streets. So if you want to find us and all of the great shows that not only just cover sports, entertainment, politics, culture, you name it, we give it to you. Check us out at 19mediagroup.com. One other thing we want to make sure that people out there are fully engaged with and understand: this is playoff season. This is what it's all about, man. Your fandom, your love for your team or multiple teams, whatever got you watching, you know what I'm saying, one of the greatest sports ever made. Why only stop to just watching? Why don't you go out there and support it? So if you're looking for the ultimate destination for NBA gear, look no further than going to the NBA store. With a huge selection of authentic and high-quality products, including jerseys, hats, and accessories, the NBA store has everything you need to show off your team pride. Plus, with exclusive and limited edition items, you can make your collection a true one-of-a-kind collection. And with an online presence, you can shop from anywhere in the world. So don't miss out on the latest trends and experiences. Visit the NBA store today by clicking on our affiliate link. If you're listening to us on your favorite audio platform, be sure to check the link in the description of the show. The Baseline is working in conjunction, in partnership with the NBA store /Fanatics, and being compensated by your patronage is also what we appreciate and adore the most. Make sure that you're supporting them by supporting us. That's how the whole family cycle works, and we'll always thank you for your support. So please go to the affiliated link, go to NBA Store/Fanatics, get your swerve on, get your gear on. This is NBA playoff time. Start rocking out and showing your love and support for your team while they make their runs to the NBA Finals. All right, with that being said, let's get right into it. It's Autopsy Report style. Sean and I are going to get in the back, throwing our white coats. You know, kind of, we'll put on our happy hats, and we'll do a good death discussing the Bulls and the Thunder. You don't want to miss out here on the Baseline.
Time to break it down.
To the bone gristle. Time now for the breakdown. Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast, and this is our coveted Autopsy Report. Shaw and I get to throw on the white coats where we examine and exhume bodies of those that were not able to be the last man standing. And it's a great time of the year to be Autopsy, Shaw, if you are either a Chicago Bulls or an Oklahoma City Thunder fan, because these two teams, Shaw, throughout the course of the year, despite injuries, you know, and really you can make an argument that for the Oklahoma City Thunder, their season probably should have ended the moment that Chet Holmgren went down. To see the emergence of this team, battle-tested, resilient, and yet give themselves an opportunity to possibly be one of the 8 teams in the Western Conference, it's just truly remarkable. I mean, hats off to this team, man. They showed resiliency through and throughout, and they also showed us that this is a team not to be effed with at all. Like, they've got some talented cats, and collectively together, another year or two under their belts, we could be talking about one of the most dangerous teams in the NBA without question. And that doesn't even include knowing that they will eventually get back Chet Holmgren. They've got picks for days. They've got assets galore. I mean, it's a good time to be Sam Presti and the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah, their GM loves them. Josh Giddey, you know, made a little quip on their exit, more or less saying he wants to be a GM whenever that time comes for him. But, you know, in the meantime, he's going to learn from the best in the business, in his opinion. And Presti and OKC, as you alluded to, without Chet Holmgren, making a run and almost getting into the playoffs is something that not many of us would have predicted going into the year. I did say it was done for them. Their tanking days had to stop. So I expected them to be more competitive and try to win this year. I did not expect them to still be in the playing game, right? So I thought they were going to be firmly supplanted, top 5, top 7 in the lottery. But they really showed something. And obviously all that is a testament to SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who had an all NBA MVP type season this year. Such a remarkable talent. And the pieces around that team right now give you nothing but hope and positive vibes for what they're ultimately going to become. Offensively, defensively, coaching wise, sidelines, general management. OKC has their ish together, bro.
Absolutely. Let me say this, Shaw, because you had talked about you've been talking about SGA for quite some time. And I know that when I spoke about SGA, it wasn't with the proliferation of really, being excited about seeing him come out there and compete and play basketball. I knew that he was a good competitor. I knew that, he could play a solid game, but I didn't see it where it was translating for me to say, is he an actual NBA superstar? Is he on the cusp? Is he just going to be a really, really good player, post up moderately good numbers? And he has to be on a team that excites you for the idea that they brought him in so that his numbers actually mean something. I'm going to dead all of that right now. I think SGA might actually be one of the most perfect fits that the Oklahoma City Thunder has probably had in a very, very long time. And I will say, I'll say why. Presti really showed us he had an eye for the talent of being able to put together such a founded young team. It just came at a bad time with the way things have trended and how the NBA and the CBA agreements and the way players are looking at marketing themselves and how things happen. That part of this became, really the dissension of what we thought could be Oklahoma City's coming out party, right? With Westbrook, Harden, and Durant. When I think about this Oklahoma City Thunder team, you want some guy who really plays within the margins. He's not going to be too high where, from a marketability standpoint, people are going to say, oh, this guy's eventually going to walk, right? He's not going to be too low where people can't be excited for seeing what he can do. And the other thing that I love about what SGA brings to the table, Shaw, is he actually is a leader, right? Like I'm seeing, and I don't know if maybe part of that is being under the tutelage of Chris Paul for that short period of time, but I'm seeing the emergence of SGA showing that level of confidence that he can be one of the best players in the game of basketball, and he can only get better at doing it. And I think the guys on his roster can feed off of that. You know, it's not like you're playing with a bunch of no-namers and losers. All of them have upside potential to really collectively together remind you a lot of what the Oklahoma City Thunder did when they had Durant, Westbrook, and Harden. I know those are big shoes to fill. All I'm saying is from a team perspective, you've got to feel good about what you're seeing from the Oklahoma City Thunder. Remember, they have Luton Dortz, right, who a lot of people are sitting there still, they don't know. That guy is a bulldog. He's that kind of guy that you want on that roster to do dirty work at the backcourt position, taking that pressure off SGA, taking that pressure off of Giddey, letting those guys get, and he's all but what, 25, 26 years old, Shaw? So I'm loving the way that this roster is rounding out a couple of years more. And I mean, literally, we could really be talking about this team being one of the most dangerous teams in the NBA.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's scary about that is they still have all the draft capital that you were touching on previous to this.
Yeah.
You know, I think four picks this year, 2 first rounders, 2 second rounders, and I think they have 3 first rounders next year. And they already gave a crap ton of them to the Knicks to get Jang, who they barely played this year. Pokusevski, who they have, you know, who was one of the league leaders in blocks for a good majority of the year before he started to battle some injuries. Then obviously waiting for Chet to come back. It's nothing, but the needle is up. It is all the way up.
Let me throw something in there real quick to your point, though, Shaw. I honestly, from seeing what I saw this year from Giddey, from not, you know, SGA's SGA, from Giddey, from Williams, from the rest of that crew, you can make the argument, Shaw, that even if Chet Holmgren comes back, because remember, there was a lot of question marks of whether or not he's going to be built to play in the NBA. Chet Holmgren may not even be the best player on that team, right? But he can still be a quintessential piece to elevate this team from going to 19th, 19th defensively to maybe even higher, right? And there were many games that they left on the table where they just couldn't defend. They just didn't get enough stops. There's no question that they can score that basketball. But as far as getting key stops go, this could be where Chet Holmgren's, presence coming in may actually help make a stamp, make a mark on how well this team can actually be competitive and add a couple of those win totals that they're not a play-in type team come next season.
Yeah, I don't want to see them, to be honest with you. I think this is going to be one of those teams that are poised to take the leap that I expected the Pelicans to take this year. And obviously they had injuries, that obviously didn't quite happen for them. But while the Pelicans were building off a lot of great vibes, and then they were number 1 in the West for a period of time, then Zion went down and so forth and so forth. That's almost the kind of expectations I'm putting on OKC from jump now, even before we go into next year. They'll get Chet back. They'll have, again, this plethora of draft picks, which I'm sure there's no reason to hold on to them. Both Jalen Williams, one's with the I, one's with the E. Both of those guys can hoop. Isaiah Joe, Trey Mann, those guys coming off the bench and being able to score, shoot the three, et cetera, et cetera. You're almost like, damn, what are they even going to do with the picks? Who do they bring in? Because they have such great young talent as currently constructed, and you kind of just want to build on that. It's just like you almost have too much equity here now, because what do you do that doesn't kind of already upset the youth that you currently have in place? And I'm sure, Presti is a smart guy. He'll figure out exactly what that needs to look like. But you'd hate to see them sacrifice maybe some of that young talent to kind of jump the line, if you will, in terms of getting another veteran into this play to kind of play alongside SGA and Chet ultimately. But maybe that's all they can actually do, because I just don't see the point in bringing in, 2 more first round draft picks this year, especially after what you did with the Knicks in the last summer as well too. And you saw that young man Jang to develop as well. So it's an interesting predicament. I wouldn't say I wouldn't want to be them, but they do have to make some hard decisions here when it comes to the talent evaluation of their roster and how they want to build, because you're in such a great place right now. Anything can kind of throw that off. And I think they just got to be really careful about the mix that they bring in when it comes to the roster development.
I wholeheartedly agree with you with where you're coming from on that point, Shaw. I think, and you know how I am, right? Like, over the last month or so, I have been a stickler on this perception that by you going out and giving up picks or you know, or even in this offseason, the intent is you want to add veteran presence. Are you adding veteran presence, or are you adding someone who is so damn good that it's unavoidable to not go after that guy, right? If you look at some teams, when they do these type of things, they cut off the momentum that they've gotten from that team's cohesiveness, that collectivity aspect of growing up and getting after it together, rather than, you know, bringing in a ringer, so to speak. Mm-hmm. If I am Presti, I am not messing with the cohesiveness that has been built by your starting roster. Okay. I would really look to try and bring a veteran guy who is completely fine with coming off of the bench, or completely fine with establishing himself as making sure that that second unit is up to snuff, almost as good as that first unit, right? And listen, injuries are going to be a problem. They always tend to. And part of that issue is when you start leaning on the other guys that you want coming up, is the depth there? Are those guys that are coming off the bench ready to step up and step in? And part of that is where it's such a fine line. But I think, you know, Presti can stretch it out a little bit, right? He can make a play to get a veteran guy, but only if the intent is to help bolster their bench. I think their bench play has a lot left to be desired, so to speak. But clearly, you can get an anchor from a defensive perspective, because I don't know whether or not Chet Holmgren is NBA ready, right? Like, he's a year behind that mark. I think if he had the opportunity to be playing around Giddey and SGA and those guys, we could see the maturation process and really tell whether or not he's ready to do it. I can't buy into the idea that if you're Sam Presti, that you're just going to just throw Holmgren in there after seeing what your Oklahoma City Thunder team did. I would like to think that you're going to probably go somewhere front court in bringing a guy in that's really going to help shore up, be a dependable person. And if you start seeing that Holmgren is not able, you can plug this guy in and he can basically come in as almost as like he's a starter. That's kind of like where I'm trending on that idea. That's where, if there's going to be any roster changes being made, that's probably where Presti is going to have to go.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it. They ended up with Dario Saric from Phoenix, and, you know, gave Phoenix Darius Bazley, another young guy who maybe didn't quite ascend in the way that they were hoping to in terms of his development. But Saric is a veteran guy, can shoot it from the three, but his contract is up at $9 million. So if they were to keep one of those picks, maybe they draft, you know, a stretch four-ish, or, as you're alluding to, go and get some sort of an upgrade for that position, specifically to play behind Alexi, and then eventually Chad, and, you know, and the other bigs, the other Williams, you know, that's there as well too. Just the plethora of options. You know, they can add shooting, they can add some more playmaking. You know, if they want to, SGA and Giddey obviously do a really great job of that right now, commingling. Isaiah Joe and guys like that to come off the bench and try to help. But I think with what Mark Daigneault has done here, you know, on the sidelines, and Presti up there in the front office, you just can't help but feel positive. And they are poised to make any big splash they want to, but it has to be the right move. That's all I will say. It just has to be the right move, because this is a nice young core of talent, and you can try to really exacerbate and make that jump quickly, but it could go very wrong, you know, with the wrong addition, right? You don't, I don't want this guy to be the scapegoat for anything negative, so to speak, but you don't go in here because you have the draft equity, so to speak, and bring in a Kyrie Irving, right? Or anybody like that. You know what I mean? It's just, you just have to be really careful about how you're building. And I think SJ can be your guy. The pieces that complement him just need to be the right fit.
What's the best comparison that we can make in the current NBA when we talk about what you do for SGA? To me, reminds me a lot like Jalen Brunson, right? I really feel like if you give me another year of SGA and Josh Giddey, they arguably can be one of the premier backcourt combinations in the NBA. And I'm not speaking lightly about this, because I really like how they complement each other. One guy has that ability to cut to the basket. Another guy has that ability to shoot the basketball. And both of them know where to go. They know how to get to their spots. They feed off of each other really well. I didn't have an opportunity to really watch the Thunder play at the early outset of the season, but as we started picking up momentum towards the possibility of OKC and the play-in. And remember, we had this conversation about, you know, making our predictions about whether or not OKC was going to make that play-in. You were saying, I would love for them to make it. And I said, they have the opportunity to finish this off. You know, their schedule allowed them to, but I think what I was starting to see from them was really getting me excited about the possibilities that this could be SGA's coming out party. And you remember I texted that to you when I saw what he did in the elimination game, right? So like one of the things that I'm just speaking to is, again, going all the way back to my original point, SGA is the kind of player, he reminds me very much like how Andrew Wiggins has come into the fall. I don't know if it's a Canadian thing where it's very, very subtle, mild-mannered, but their game is really stealthy and lethal, bro. And that's again, you don't want to mess with that. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to look at what happened to a guy like Andrew Wiggins. Look how long it took before he elevated himself into believing in what he can contribute, what confidence he had to have in order to be a part of something where his game translated to being something successful and not always questioned. And I'm just saying that, like, right now, Oklahoma City has the right combination of players where a guy like SGA, his game translate to those younger guys or guys of his ilk, his age, can actually go out there and say, we can run with these guys. We can run with these boys. I don't need to be paired up next to a Booker because that's what it's going to take to win an NBA championship. You give me a Giddey and we'll get there, right? You just got to have a little patience. Just give us some games. And that's what I'm hoping is what we're going to see happen, because I'm telling you, man, like, it's really weird watching how I was not on SGA so much for what I was hoping to see from what I'm now seeing right now. It's just a process. And sometimes you just got to work with the process until you start seeing glimpses of it coming to fruition. And I'm telling you, man, this team right here, man, they're going to make me really excited about what we're expecting to see in that Northwest division. I think if you are Denver Nuggets, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Utah Jazz, you have to really be looking at this, you know what I'm saying? Like, be very, very mindful. You know what I'm saying? Maybe those games that you got those easy dubs from, they're not going to be easy anymore moving forward with the way that these guys have improved themselves, even over the last couple of weeks, let alone what they've shown us this whole season.
Yeah, so you're looking at a team, you know, who was it, like 13th and 14th, I think, offensive rating, defensive rating. So really, truly middle of the pack, and have room to climb in those top 10s in both of those things, just with a little bit more seasoning. Obviously, getting Chet back can help them tremendously. You know, and as we're thinking about it, if I'm them, probably the splashiest move maybe you make a play for like a Kyle Kuzma or somebody like that, you know, to complement at the 4. I don't think you need to go Dame or, you know, one of those larger names to kind of play alongside there. I think it's a high quality guy, maybe someone still in their mid to late 20s, if you will, that can give you some of that. Or go to Detroit if you have the pick. And it's going to sound foolish because, like, you don't just give away draft picks, but the Thunder really could. You could throw a first and a second to Detroit and get Bogdanovich. And just competent guys who can really complement the rest of your roster. So to me, Presti, again, it just has so many options on the table here. I can't wait to see what they do. And I know they say that about a lot of teams, but truly, truly excited about the possibilities here, because I think roster construction is going to be key to how they matriculate and build off of the success they had this past season.
Well, so I like where you were going with that. I don't want to nitpick on what you were thinking as far as what it would probably take to get a Bogdanovich. I don't know if I'd want Bogdanovich on this team. There's two things that I really would like to see this team get a little bit better at, that even if, let's say, for example, you do go out and you get yourself a 4, maybe another, you know, a comparable 5, you know, with some, I think this team can get better with their athleticism. This team ranked 21st as far as defensive rebounding goes. They ranked 21st in assist. I'm not so much worried about the assist, because that to me is just more of the maturation and togetherness that SGA and Giddey can continue to build. But the fact that they are not a really good rebounding basketball team as far as defensive rebounding, meaning they don't give themselves enough opportunities, especially when they're down games, right? And their offense is just not clicking. And then they don't shoot a really good field goal percentage, right? So part of it is they have to have a front court presence with consistency of scoring when they're not shooting the basketball greater. The mid-range game is just not up to par. So I would like to see them go after people with a little bit more athleticism, probably a little bit more savvy, to be able to give them more chances for them to be as even more prolific in their scoring as they already are. Because to me, I'm saying like this, they're fifth best, but Shaw, what I'm saying is that what I like to see from this team is when they run into those situations where what they're trying to execute, what Doug and I is trying to execute for them is not happening, they can always lean on good old-fashioned, get down, you know what I'm saying, in the trenches, score the basketball, right? To get an and one, you know what I'm saying, the easy way, that type of thing. That's what I wanted to see. I noticed that more than anything else. And Chet Holmgren coming in is going to help them on the defensive side. Not great from blocks. They're going to get better with that. But I would like to see them get a little bit better and a little bit more athletic on the front court side. Yeah.
I mean, I think I can complement that with one final statement, you know, maybe even some girth, because, you know, Chet and even Alexi, those are skinny dudes. They're
some wiry cats, man.
Yeah.
Wiry.
They're a little light. They're a little light. And so maybe they could use a little bit more physicality, you know, on the block specifically. I know Williams he's not quite as tall, but does have a little bit of that from the physical standpoint. But, you know, we know we're not going back to the basket days and posting up. But even just like the physical presence of like a lob threats and things like that too, maybe they could add somebody in that ilk. But again, you know, we're nitpicking here. Let's see what Presti and company end up ultimately doing, because this Thunder team is really, really on their way to becoming really successful.
All right. So any final words, any words of encouragement during this sad time for our Oklahoma City Thunder fans?
I mean, no, I think we said it, right. And it's all positive. I think
we've been singing the praises, right?
Yeah. You know, third-year Giddey coming into this situation, SGA will be an all NBA player by the time all is said and done here. What confidence he's to come in, and you have the reserve coming in, the troops, if you will, and Chet Holmgren, Williams as well too. Like, just those guys, they played, you know. I mean, this is a really, really great story, I think, for the NBA. In a city that didn't know if it was going to be able to bounce back, you know, after the Durant and Harden and Westbrook stuff, so to speak. Yeah, they had Chris Paul there for a year, and that really helped them, you know, I think bridge the gap. A couple of lean years here too, but SGA has really, really given them something to be excited about, and the addition of Giddey too seemed to be the right move. So I have nothing but positive things for OKC in the years to come.
Well, listen, for our OKC Thunder fans, listen, this is a great time, you know, nothing to hang your hat over. This is a team that basically was one win away from being among the great 16, right? The Sweet 16 of the NBA. And no one saw this coming, especially after the pain that you guys endured in losing your #1 pick in Chet Holmgren. So, you know, sunny days are definitely ahead of you when you got SGA in your corner playing at this kind of level, and the rest of that group rounded out, man. It's nothing but good things. But listen, that doesn't mean that your NBA season is over with, right? No, I mean, there's so much more basketball for you to watch. I mean, you guys are ultimately going to be scouting what the Oklahoma City Thunder is going to have to be doing for next year. So why not fully immerse yourself in the NBA postseason? Are you tired of placing bets alone and not having anyone to talk about your predictions? Do you want to connect with other sports bettors and share your winning strategies? Look no further than SHARPZ, the social network for sports bettors. With SHARPZ, you can connect with your friends and see what they're betting on, and even interact with their bets. The iOS app connects to all major sports books and daily fantasy platforms like DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, Prize Picks, and Underdog. And here's the best part. If you download SHARPZ now, I mean right now, and you use the promo code VB286, that's our code. That's the FAM's code, the baseline code. You'll receive access to the community to start showing off your betting chops and an opportunity to compare your bets with us. So maybe this is your first time. Why not do it with your friends? Don't do it with Joey Betts, who's been making 200 grand off of everybody else because they don't know what they're doing. Do it with your peoples. Have fun doing it. There's no shame in putting up those bets out there with your peoples. What are you waiting for? Download SHARPZ today. Use our promo code VB286 and start connecting with other sports bettors. Don't forget to share your winning strategies and interact with other users as well. Join the social network for sports bettors and take your betting game to the next level. Stick your neck out and win. Coming up, We're going to talk about that other team that unfortunately did not make themselves available for the rest of the Eastern Conference 8. That's the Chicago Bulls. I mean, what more can we say, though? This team made an impressive run in an improbable situation. You'll find out how we autopsy them here on The Baseline. We are back, Cal Lee Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, as we continue the autopsy reports. And the next team that we're putting on the slab, the Chicago Bulls. This is the team, Shaw, that it's hard to say. When you look at the roster, you say to yourself, man, this team should probably be a top 6 team. No question, in the Eastern Conference. But injuries obviously have plagued them. And it's hard to say. I can clearly, I think, and we've talked about this team a little bit during the course of the year, Shaw. There's something not about this team that's completely connected. There's something that seems to be disjointed. You know, like when you have like a toy or a device, and you can clearly hear or see that it's just not operating the way that you used to. You try to make it sound like, oh, you know, it's just old or whatever the case may be, but you truly believe that there's something just not quite right about that device, and you just don't know how you want to go about fixing it, right? Should you fix it? Should you bring it to someone to fix it, or whatever the case may be? Or maybe you just don't want the truth that it needs to be fixed, or it needs to, you just basically need to trash it and get you another one, right? Like, or just completely go in a different direction. And I feel like that's where we are with the Chicago Bulls. A 40-42 record, Shaw. You would say to yourself, given the circumstances and what it took to be the 10th best team and even to give yourself a chance in the play-in, but you still look at this team and you say, do they really represent being a 40-42 team?
Well, I don't want to just beat the dead horse here. I thought Chicago should have, gone and got a while ago. To me, the writing was on the wall. And then they, despite themselves, continue to kind of scuffle and fight. And they add Pat Beverly. Then they have one of the top 5, top 10 defenses, post All-Star, as they lead into the play-in game. They look like they're all but dead in the water in the play-in game against Toronto. Then Zach LaVine takes over. DeMar DeRozan's daughter starts screaming. And, the Bulls come back, and capture, the first win to get to the play-in game against the Miami Heat. Winning that game sounds
like a movie, but it don't sound like something you want to script for an NBA season.
But winning the game versus the Heat, then ultimately collapse, score like 1 point in the final 4.5 minutes of the game, and lose to the Heat and Jimmy Butler and those guys. And then you see really kind of the Jekyll and Hyde of the Chicago Bulls all along. This is a team that can only be so good. They can be here, my phrase here, it could be very much the same bat time, same bat channel again next year without significant changes. And I don't think that's where they want to be. DeRozan and LaVine are 2 really, really good basketball players. I think they fit okay. The pieces around them, I think, are still to be desired. And obviously with Lonzo being out and not quite sure when his return will be, they have a very big decision to make on Vucevic, I think, as well. And while, I think Arsenovas came out and said they do want to bring him back, is this the right move? Do you just retread this whole situation just to kind of be back in the same place? And Pat Beverly is not going to get you another 10 to 12 wins, to put you into, firmly into the playoff conversation as a 4 or 5 seed. That's not what's going to happen. So to me, they need to take a hard look at what this looks like. LaVine and DeRozan are owed a lot of money. Lonzo's owed a lot of money and hasn't really been able to be on the floor, as we know. And now they got to figure out if they want to pay Vucevic as well. I think we're in store for some pretty big changes here. And I don't think Donovan has anything to worry about. But ultimately, the roster does need to change in some capacity. And it could come at the expense of Vucevic and or LaVine and or DeRozan.
I'm going to say this. I hope I'm not sounding disrespectful. this is the most top-heavy basketball team, I think, in the NBA. When I say that, I mean DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine make up a very big portion of the team's ability to compete, so to speak, and everyone else kind of has to follow suit. You know how you have like the really good team, Shaw, if you take one or two guys out, the rest of the guys can still function. They may not be able to beat the best teams, because the reason why they're probably the best is because their team is so well-rounded, so well coached, and their basketball IQ allows them, affords them the ability to kind of be that way. When you look at this basketball team, Shaw, there are a lot of guys that I feel like they are coming. They're not coming in with the same level of dedication and attention to detail that is helpful for what the team needs to succeed as it would be from what you're seeing from other teams. I think part of that is in the manifestation of what happened to Zach LaVine. Mm-hmm. And listen, him scoring 25 points per game, I applaud him. I think it's great, but he's just scoring 25 points for the wrong team. I don't think that he's completely bought in to this idea that he wants to be a Chicago Bull. There's some guys that, you know, when they play on a team, it's like they wear that shirt, that jersey with pride. They understand the history. Derrick Rose is one of those guys. I think it hurt Derrick Rose to the core that he wasn't able to lift people out of the shadows. It's not his fault to lift people out of the shadows of what happened during the Michael Jordan era. Bulls fans were spoiled and were not realistic about how long it's going to take to find some way to replace that. And they never gave him a fair chance. Also, the injuries played a role in that. You can make the same argument for something like Zach LaVine. Now, I'm not comparing Zach LaVine to Derrick Rose. What I'm comparing is the lineage of what's taken place. Zach LaVine has had injuries that I think has stymied his ability to be the guy that I think he wants to be. And maybe he thought he could be that guy in Chicago. And then prior to Paxton, and I forget who the other GM was before the new one came in, moves were being made that made it seem like we can't rely on you being that guy because you're never around to do it. And then when contract time comes, you can clearly tell that he would have probably wanted to go elsewhere if he could have gotten the bag, but realized that his bag is better suited here in Chicago. And you cannot operate in that kind of space. If you're Billy Donovan, if you're the Chicago Bulls, that might seem nice and well-intended. But to your point, Shaw, this team, it felt like they were forced to stay together rather than recognizing that they needed to be apart. And I think this was a manifestation of that in seeing how inconsistent this team has played throughout the course of the year. And you could put the blame on a head coach if you want, on on certain play. It's not. It's collectively that just everybody was not on the same page about how to move this thing forward and give yourself a chance to say we deserve to be competing with the rest of these other teams who clearly understood the writing on the wall, right? Like the 76ers, the Miami Heat. All of them have got issues, but all of them have played together long enough to recognize when they have to kind of dial down their personal shit and get the team shit right so that they can go out and make that legit run where necessary. And it's just weird how a team could not figure that out on a consistent enough basis to not allow themselves to get knocked out when they had an opportunity to knock themselves back in when they had it.
Yeah, to me, it all stems down to their inability to get everybody on the same page and keep everybody healthy. Alonzo maybe fixes a good majority of this from play creation and facilitation standpoint that they seem to be lacking. And you have DeRozan who can do it and did do it in San Antonio for a while. But now you're left with Caruso and DeSumo and we're forgetting my man's name here now. I said Caruso, Williams, Patrick Williams as well too, coming off in that 4-man situation. A lot of guys who just are not natural play creators, right? And Vucevic, who can pass from the post a little bit too. You have Kobe White, who we didn't even discuss, and he's going to be up. His contract is up, and another kind of combo guard. So they're just really kind of grasping, I think, at straws here, trying to figure out where do they get play creation from. Yes, they're a good defensive team. I think they even finished in the top 5, I think, as the year concluded. But is the feel good story of Beverly and what you did getting Vucevic the first year that we acquired him from Orlando, then bringing in DeRozan quite after that, and the success they had last year enough to kind of keep this together at the cost that it's going to take to keep this roster together. And to me, that question is a no. And whether you want to continue to have the good vibes, which I know the GM came out and said that he kind of thought, hey, they were trending in the right direction. Maybe they know something and see something better than we can right now. And if Lonzo comes back, is the elixir that puts his team back into the conversation to be in the middle of the pack of the Eastern Conference. But I think that's a tall ask for somebody who's been out for 2 years. And not quite sure if and when he's going to be back altogether. And then, Kobe White and Vucevic, do you pay those guys what they're going to command salary wise? And then that's your team, and I just don't know if that's championship level. And I think they need to take a hard look at that, unfortunately. And it may cause for some breakups here of the Bulls.
One other thing that I wanted to emphasize, and it's interesting, Shah, because you said like on the latter part of the season, they really stepped up and became one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. I'm gonna poke holes at that in a little bit. Yes, collectively they were a really good defensive team, but they were not good when it came to the three. They didn't shoot the three, right? They were one of the worst teams. But more importantly, they didn't defend. They didn't defend the three well. Okay, so one of the things that I often say is, you can get away with doing that if like you're playing, say, in a division or in a conference where maybe collectively, like a lot of the teams that you play against are not that great. And it just how happens that, this team maybe had your number. They just, this was their night. They're just hitting threes. And you could even watch in the games in which, they were trailing, suffering. A lot of those key runs, 3-point shots being made, runs started, can't be stopped, right? Just you can't have that, right? And I say that because it's not going to stop. Now, I'll put part of that on Billy Donovan in the sense that I'm sure he has to be aware of this going into next year, because you can't tell me that you can continue to play that kind of way where you're good to defend everything else except the arc. Like you're playing against the Boston Celtics, you're playing against the Philadelphia 76ers, you're playing against the Indiana Pacers, you're playing against the Milwaukee Bucks. Those are 4 teams already, Shaw. I haven't even named the rest of them who I know will shoot the 3 ball at a much higher rate than I think the Chicago Bulls are even imagining how to defend for. Even if your intent is that you're still trying to figure things out, you have got to be able to defend against the 3. That's just what it is, man. That's just the NBA. That's how it plays. You cannot be the worst team defending the 3 ball and then be the worst team shooting the 3 ball, right? Like, so something's got to give there. But I can definitely tell you when people say, oh, this is a really good defensive team, I will challenge you in saying, yes, they were probably good defensively as far as their ability to play down and in, their guards switching, probably being able to play up against the bigger guards who don't like to shoot. But eventually, they were not great defending guys who needed to shoot the basketball, right? Like as good as Caruso is and Hale, Patrick Beverly as good as he is and Hale, you cannot be the worst team defending the 3. That's just a no-no, especially when those are what creates the kind of runs that take place in order to give you to mitigate your opportunities or chances for what you work so hard for offensively, is to be able to give yourself that chance in the 4th quarter. Can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are good points. 29th in 3-point made against them, so they averaged they gave up 13.1 threes were hit on them on a night-to-night basis, while only making 10 threes. Good for last on their side of it too. So they've lost that differential, like definitely by down 9 just in the 3-point argument and conversation on a night-to-night basis. And that is not something that you can have in today's game in any capacity. And while I have to kind of look at the on and off numbers and maybe even more so towards the tail end, how Beverly may have impacted that to some degree. I think ultimately your point is definitely made here with Chicago. So what do they do now with that? Because even the guys who they want to retain are not defensive stalwarts, and they're definitely not helping them on that side of the basketball when it comes to defending the 3, and Vucevic and White. Those are the 2 biggest names that they have to kind of contend with and figure out what they ultimately want to do. Do they bring back Andre Drummond, or do they just try to buy him out and get him off the books in some capacity? Javonte Green, Sumo is also a free agent going into this year. Beverly obviously was picked up at the scrap heap. So what do they do there? To me, there's a lot more questions that they don't necessarily want to have the answers to. I think they'd be happy if some of these guys just kind of went away quietly into the night and it allowed them an opportunity to try to maybe refresh in some capacity. But to me, LaVine's contract is very, very heavy. You know, at $40+ million, there's a lot of people out there who don't believe in him and still think of him as, you know, just this volume scorer who doesn't really bring anything else to the game. I happen to like LaVine and think he's a very good basketball player, but I can understand the argument, especially at the price tag and how much of the cap that ultimately eats up for you too. But he's also younger than DeRozan. So to me, they may need to come up to a decision on what they do with one or both of those guys, while also then again operating with, hey, Vucevic probably needs to go, and kind of doing somewhat of a mid build. And I know it's not the easiest thing to do in the NBA, especially today. But I don't think they're tearing it down to the studs in any capacity, and nor do they need to, because Donovan's also a pretty good coach. And as long as he can continue to rely on some of the defensive principles, whether some of it is fool's gold or not, they are there. And I think the writing is on the wall for them to make some changes that can get them in a better position to be competitive. They're not NBA championship level ready in any capacity, or going to be soon, but they can definitely get to where they can secure a playoff spot and not consistently be in the play-in if they make the right moves.
Absolutely. So there's two things I want to highlight, and to your point, Shaw, before we just go ahead and we'll eulogize them. You bring up some excellent points, but I think part of the reason why this combination, right, is not going to work, and I think you've got enough of a sample size in order for you to be able to say, you know, if you are the Bulls execs, you have to make a move, right? DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine collectively will attempt 12.5 free throws per game. Your two top scorers, who average close to 25 points a game, of that, they're only on the free throw line 12 times, right? Your big, Vucevic, only gets to the free throw line maybe twice, right? So they're making this too hard for themselves, right? They don't, you have, in other words, they're relying so heavily on their perimeter shooting. They have to shoot such a high percentage because they're not getting to the basket. They're not taking advantage of getting, and ones, right? Because they're bailing them out by shooting the basketball too much. So if you're not going to make it at a high percentage, and I'm not saying that, look, Zach shot 48%. I'm not saying that, like, you look at that percentage and say, oh, no, he's not making his shots. What I'm saying is that a lot of his shot making is one where it doesn't give him an opportunity for him to get to the free throw line enough, right? Same thing with DeRozan. That's the only, you can say that is the only quote unquote weakness to the type of game he plays, because he is so mid-range friendly that in most cases, if that shot is not hitting on a 99 basis, he does not proactively go to the basket. Yet he's still the best person to get to the basket on that team because he averages 7 free throws a night, essentially. You know what I'm saying? But as a team collectively, Shaw, they don't get to the free throw line. So again, they're making this so difficult for themselves. Part of it could be the way that the guys play. Part of it could be, the system that they're playing in. A lot of it just really comes down to who they are and what their game manifests, and you can't have two guys basically get to the free throw line and everyone else don't. Like, at some point you got to show some type of aggression to your game. And that's what is sorely lacking for the Chicago Bulls team, which is hard pressed to think, because again, they're among one of the better defensive teams. So to me, there's a little bit of attitude. There's a little bit of physicality that I think that they bring to the table. I just don't know how it doesn't translate to the offensive side of the ball, where they're giving themselves additional and free points by basically getting to the free throw line.
Yeah, well, part of it is just the volume at which both of those guys operate. So there's not a whole lot of touches for anybody else and opportunities for people to get to the line, especially with Vucevic not being a true back to the basket type guy who's looking for fouls. He's, oftentimes at the pinch post, oftentimes at the 3-point line, does a couple DHOs here and there. And you might see him post up every now and then, but not initiating a lot of contact. And to the point we were making earlier, without a true table setter to even put you in the right position, get you in motion where you may have the opportunity to even be fouled, that's where I think you're gonna see them really struggle with that aspect of the game, a lot, because it is a lot of your turn, my turn with DeRozan and LaVine, especially when one of them goes out. Then the other one's like, all right, whatever, I'm just hooping and trying to make it do what I do for myself. And I think those are things they ultimately need to work on.
But even if you have Lonzo Ball, Shaw, I don't think he gets to the free throw line enough. Now maybe that'll change. Maybe part of
but I don't think it's about him getting to the line. I think it's about the way he creates for others and getting them to the line and putting them in the position. So it's not just DeRozan ISO mid-range, LaVine ISO, doing whatever he does as well.
I agree with you, but remember, Lonzo Ball does not shoot the basketball well, right? So part of it as well too is, again, if you're someone who's going to have the ball in hand and other guys are going to want to shoot, that still means that someone has to aggressively get to the basket. Somebody has to be going towards the basket and create at least the idea that a team has to be physical with you down there and possibly foul you. I'm not saying you got to get fouled every single time just because you're driving. What I'm saying is just the way that they seem to play the game, Shaw, that their style of basketball doesn't lend themselves the opportunities for them to get those free points. And so you have to depend so heavily on your perimeter game, your shooting game. And again, this team, while they have a couple of guys that do shoot the basketball relatively well, they don't shoot it well enough and consistently enough. And also, they're not great at rebounding offensively to give themselves additional opportunities if they're not landing that night, right? So, again, those things, it kind of adds itself up. But you brought up an excellent point, though, to the fact that both of their top scorers are ball-dominant players. The ball is in their hands so much. And I think they may have to develop something differently if you're still going to roll out these two guys and Ball again next year, with this idea that they're going to be even better because of it. I don't see how that's going to play with how all of these things kind of like matriculate down the line as far as what's affecting them offensively.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you can't change the roster and personnel, then do you change and institute a different type of offense? And those are things I think Donovan and Karstoffis will ultimately figure out. Like that is that's the card they're dealt. And we've seen stranger things happen. So if they decide to re-up and bring Kobe White and Vucevic back and just keep what it is currently and hope Lonzo comes back at some point, well, what do they do from an offensive standpoint and reimagine it where it's not just LaVine and DeRozan basically taking turns with the basketball and going in isolation and whatever capacity that is. And that I think can be Donovan's homework for the offseason for him to get better with the roster that may not have the opportunity to get better, when it comes to the personnel.
Where do you think the draft capital lies with the Chicago Bulls? Do you think that, you basically take this roster, you move a couple of guys out, and hope that maybe there is that possibility of drafting someone, that can come in and instantly shore up some of the things that they obviously are lacking?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm reading it correctly, I think they have their own pick, but it's a pick swap, I think, with Portland. So, they'll get the lesser of those two, I would imagine, this year. And then, they can figure out they don't have a pick the next year, and then they have another first rounder in 2026. It's going to be tight, and talent evaluation at the draft level is always it's always a hard push. You like some people do it really well, and then some people really struggle at it. I don't know if we have enough of a track record here now with the Bulls GM to understand exactly where he lands on that side of it. He came from Denver, so Denver's had a decentish track record in drafting guys, but also giving up guys and giving up on guys too early as well. So where Karstoffis lands on all of that, we'll ultimately see. But the option is definitely out there as long as you have a pick that maybe you can make something happen. But I think they'll probably be better served in trying to figure it out from some sort of a trade or sign and trade with maybe some of their existing talent.
All right. Well, Shaw, listen, man, this has been an awesome show again. And, listen, if you're Chicago Bulls, I know, we said, it sounded like we're bashing them. It's not. I think that if the right moves can be made, you can salvage what you've been getting from the Chicago Bulls the last couple of seasons. But to what Shaw and I have been saying is that the way that this roster is currently constructed, you're going to run into some issues. And I think it's going to rear its ugly head come next season because the way that other teams have improved in the Eastern Conference, some of the things that the Bulls are lacking, they're just not going to be able to mask and get away with unless, you know, the guys that they have are fully healthy and are going to step up and really kind of, you know, take strides in again, improving those deficiencies that kind of reared its ugly head and preventing them from continuing forward in this year's playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see, Shaw. But, you know, again, the Bulls and the Thunder, it provided exciting basketball down that stretch, exciting basketball in the play-in situation. And again, you know, they're going to be a force. I just want to see them not be maligned or sidelined again with certain things that I think can be controllable on their end. And they make the right move so that this is sustainable, because I think the NBA again is better when these teams are competitive and are pushing the needle, you know, pushing these other teams to step their game up as well too.
Two teams, very different situations. One we're really excited about, one we're a little bit bullish on, and we'll see where it lands over the course of the offseason. But two very competent coaches, I think, on both those sidelines, and I think they'll figure out what ultimately makes sense for their roster. We'll get the best version of themselves, but what that means to each one of those teams will be, I think, very, very vastly different going into next season.
Absolutely. As always, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us once again. You know what I'm saying? For our listeners out there who are wanting to get up on the best NBA gear, be sure to go to the NBA store /fanatics. Get down with them. Go to NBA store. Use our affiliation link. And, you know, get yourself ready, man. This is some great basketball being played. I'm sure that y'all want to take your social media selfies and, you know, get on your TikTok and do your dances every time your team advances in the first round. So be sure to get that gear. Use our affiliation, man, and get yourself some great discounts supporting your favorite team. For the Baseline, Cali, Warren, Shaw, we appreciate you guys, each and every single one of you. And we'll catch up with you